Everything is going to hell down here in Texas.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the show. This is your host, Big Bad Bob. Welcome, one and all, to this, the 196th episode of the Lone Gunman Podcast. I am your boy, Big Bad Bob Rob Clark, here with you. It's a pleasure, as always. And today, we're going to be taking a look at those complicit bastards. They had to be, to make sure Oswald got what was coming to him. They had to be complicit. And I'm talking about the Dallas effing police department. That's right. So let's do some diving. And I'm going to give a shout out to the Malcolm Blunt collection at Dealey Plaza, UK. Most of this stuff came from there, and the many documents Bart has tirelessly uploaded to the website. And a lot of this stuff comes from the HSCA, and it all has to do with the Dallas Police Department, folks. Those complicit bastards. Now, the first thing I'm going to get into here is an interview with patrolman and motorcycle cop Starvis Ellis on August the 4th, 1978. Retired Sergeant Ellis recalled the rain suits required by the motorcade detail the morning of November 22nd, 1963. But the weather cleared while they were at Love Field prior to the arrival of Air Force One. Ellis also recalled the limousine's bubble top being removed before they headed for town. The sergeant was in charge of the motorcycle detail and as such remained in the vicinity of the first vehicle, which contained Chief Curry, Sheriff Decker, and Special Agent in Charge Sorrells of the Secret Service. He changed positions periodically to see all was proper with the spacing of the vehicles, which was to be greater when the speed increased on open stretches and close to one another in congested areas. He recalled one minor incident between Love Field and Dealey Plaza near Inwood and Lemon when a group of schoolgirls stepped into the roadway and pulled their shirts up, exposing their bare breasts. No, I'm kidding. Just a small fantasy of mine. A group of schoolgirls stepped into the roadway as JFK's limousine approached. With reduced clearance, the limousine stopped, much to the delight of the girls, but to the apparent dismay of the Secret Service agents. The motorcade resumed after a brief period, but the agents seemed to exert more force than the situation called for. This caused the sergeant to respond to the scene and later to catch up with the first car and report to the chief. Otherwise, the trip to the Dallas Police Department seemed routine. Ellis places himself some 100 to 125 feet in front of JFK's limousine alongside the first vehicle. When the first report sounded, he remembers they had started down the hill on Elm Street and were preparing for the different tempo. He turned to give the signal for increased speed and more spacing as the first shot was fired. He knew some type of weapon had been discharged, inasmuch as he saw the debris scatter from the edge of the curb. His first impression was that of a fragment grenade. He looked right at JFK, who had turned and looked over his right shoulder. As the president turned back, the governor started to turn the same way, but the next shot was fired, and the president seemed to slouch down, and Connolly flinched. The third shot blew the president's head up. Cheney came up to his position, advising that the president had been shot. Ellis advised the chief, who ordered the hospital run. During this period of time, he saw his wife's niece, her husband, and their two small children on the grassy knoll. I believe he's talking about the Newmans. So Starvis Ellis's wife's niece would be Bill and Gail Newman and their two small children. They pushed the children to the ground and covered them with their bodies. He mentioned someone took a picture of this, and it had been published many times over the years. The subsequent trip to Parkland was made with all speed, but it was evident the president had been killed. As it developed, Governor Connolly benefited from the expedient run as it afforded him prompt medical attention. Ellis recalls using his transmitter frequently, but cannot remember if he used it riding from DP to Parkland. He had no occasion to park nor cut the engine off until arriving at the hospital. There was considerable record of malfunction with three-wheeler radio gear, chiefly sticking transmitters. Ellis recommends checking Martino or Marino. The second in command of the Texas Schoolbook Depository was a man of Cuban descent who had actually hired Lee Harvey Oswald. Ellis suggested that retired Sergeant Harkness should also be interviewed about Oswald passing out leaflets in Dallas, and that Harkness had originally investigated this complaint. Well, that's interesting that Sergeant Starvis Ellis has heard of John Martino in 1978, and that he recommends speaking to Harkness about Oswald's Dallas, Texas leafleting, which we have heard about but have no concrete evidence of contact or arrest made while he did so. So interesting stuff there from Starvis Ellis. Next up, the HSCA wanted to talk to Captain Will Fritz, folks. And on 4/20/78, after smoking a big fat joint at the Plaza Hotel at 1933 Main Street, Dallas, they were finally able to. Captain Will Fritz was asked if he remembered sending any of the homicide men to the Dallas City Hall telephone switchboard room to monitor Oswald's phone calls. Fritz stated that he doesn't remember giving any orders to do this, but he stated that it still could have happened. He also stated that the jail record should show the calls that Oswald made, but was informed that the jail records showed nothing relating to a call from Oswald to John Hurt. At Cliff Fenton's request, I asked Fritz if he remembers a subject named Akasha Smith being arrested in Houston, and a search of either his person or apartment revealed photographs of the Dallas sewer system. Fritz stated that the name was familiar to him. He stated that he vaguely remembers an incident involving photos of the sewer system in the area of Love Field. We were told by Captain Fritz we could find everything he had to say in the Warren Commission report. He would not like to receive a federal subpoena, but if he did, he would tell the truth. We began our conversation by expressing interest in some of his experience as a law enforcement officer and the homicide rate in Dallas. He said that he hoped that we were just working for the committee and not helping anyone who was writing a book. Question: what was Oswald's reaction and temperament during the interrogation? Captain Fritz stated that he believed that he and Oswald were getting along well. He said that it is just his opinion, but he feels that if he would have had Oswald a little while longer, he could have gotten him to talk. He stated that Oswald did not get upset, or that Oswald did get upset a couple of times. For instance, he did not like Hosty because of some incident with his wife. Captain Fritz said that he thought Oswald was in complete control of himself and that he answered whatever questions he felt like answering. Captain Fritz was asked about the book or notebook that he had with him during the time he testified before the Warren Commission. Fritz stated that the police department, had put the notebook together. Did you observe anyone taking notes during the interrogation of Oswald? He says, I don't recall anyone taking notes, but Tom Kelly, a Secret Service agent, could have been taking notes. Isn't it customary to take notes during an investigation? Captain Fritz stated that in some cases he did, and others he didn't. This particular case, he didn't. At no time would Captain Fritz criticize any person or agency present during the interrogation. He stated that he had invited most of those present at the interrogation and that they were free to ask questions of Oswald. We worked with the FBI, the Secret Service, the Postals every day. I couldn't shut them out now. During the interrogation, did Oswald ever admit to shooting President Kennedy? Captain Fritz stated that he asked Oswald that question, and Oswald denied shooting President Kennedy. Did Oswald ever admit to shooting Officer Tippit? Fritz answered, not in so many words. What do you mean by not in so many words? Well, Captain Fritz said that he did not want to go into that because there were things that he would have to give his opinion on from things Oswald said during the interrogation. Did Oswald tell you where he was heading when he was stopped by Officer Tippit? Captain Fritz said that Oswald told him that he was going to the theater. We mentioned that Oswald was going in the opposite direction of the theater, and Captain Fritz said that Oswald could have been going to one of the used car lots on Jefferson to get a ride out of town. Captain Fritz said that because of the number of eyewitnesses to the murder of Tippit, they did not spend much time on that case, but rather on the Kennedy murder because the evidence was not as great and they didn't have too many witnesses. Captain Fritz was asked about the change in his orders from riding in the motorcade to going directly to the trademark. He stated that he received a phone call about 10 p.m. on the night before the motorcade from someone in the police department, but he couldn't remember who. He had wanted to find out who had authorized the change, but got busy and never got to it. Fritz stated, it's too bad because I would have been right under that window. We said, you could have been shot, and he said, yes, you're right. Captain Fritz was asked if he recalled the photograph of Oswald holding a rifle in the rear yard of 214 Neely Street. He stated that they had one of the photographs blown up and showed it to Oswald. Oswald said that it was a trick photography. We asked Fritz of what he thought if he thought Oswald acted alone in shooting President Kennedy. He stated that he didn't want to give an opinion because he might be misquoted. We asked Fritz about the shooting of Oswald by Jack Ruby. He stated that he didn't know Jack Ruby. Okay. Although some police officers did know him, most. Fritz was told that there were 72 officers assigned to the transfer of Oswald. Captain Fritz was concerned about people trying to take Oswald away from the police, and also that some police officer might do something crazy to Oswald because a fellow officer and the president had been murdered. He couldn't understand how Jack Ruby got into the basement area to shoot Oswald. When it happened, he thought some police officer may have shot Oswald. Captain Fritz was asked about his interrogation of Jack Ruby, and he said that Ruby stated, I just wanted to be a hero. It's the craziest damn thing I've ever done in my life. You reckon, Jack? Do you reckon, Jack? All right. Now, we've talked about old Tom Tilson on this show before, and this is his official HSCA statement. Of course, he's talked to newspaper reporters. He was in the British Bugliosi-led mock trial of Lee Harvey Oswald, which is pretty fascinating. I encourage everybody to go check it out. Tom Tilson is in there, and he gives his testimony. Of course, that was in the 80s. This here happened, it predates any newspaper reports, predates the mock trial. This is from August of 1978. Interview. Mr. Tilson was assigned to Uniform Patrol District 92, which covers Jefferson from Marsalis to Tyler. Tilson was off duty that Friday, and Officer J.D. Tippett was covering his district. He had taken one daughter to Dealey Plaza, Dinah, and was in the process of returning in his private car with another daughter, Judy, to pick up Dinah when his police radio reported the shooting to Dallas police at the JFK limousine. He was headed east of Commerce, approaching the triple underpass, when he saw a suspicious white man slipping and sliding down the embankment on the north side of Elm Street, west of the underpass. The man attracted his attention by the breakneck pace he was coming down that steep incline, and he was conspicuous inasmuch as he was the only one running away from the plaza area. His speed made it appear that he slipped right up against the side of the dark car, and he seemed to do something at the back door part, like throw something inside, then jump behind the wheel and take off very fast. His direction was consistent, away from the plaza. As the Tilsons approached the area on Commerce, the first thing they noticed was the JFK limousine escort emerge from the underpass at high speed and turn towards Stemmons. The man running, sliding down the embankment, was the next sequence of events. Given his 17 years of police department experience, the radio broadcast, and the conspicuous man, he called this to Judy's attention, advising he was going to turn and give them chase. This entailed negotiating the underpass and turning left on Houston and left again on Main, and passed through the underpass again. He prevailed and found the dark car in Industrial waiting to make a left turn. Following south on Industrial, he told Judy to get something to note the information he was about to give. By the time the man made a fast turn onto the toll road for Fort Worth, he was within 100 feet of him and called out the tag number and make and model of the car, which she wrote down on a piece of paper. He then returned to Dealey Plaza, picked up Dinah, and used a phone at the Greyhound to call homicide with a view toward having the suspect stopped on the Fort Worth toll road. Although he is unable to recall the homicide man to whom he spoke, he does remember the man took what seemed like a long time getting all the details. In any event, he hasn't heard anything about the information he gave since then. He describes the man as a white man, 38 to 40 years of age, 5'8" or 5'9", round face, dark hair, and wearing dark clothes. He said he knew Jack Ruby, and the man looked enough like him to be his twin. Now, at this point, Mr. Tilson commented on the resourcefulness of Ruby arranging to be in that newspaper office with all those influential witnesses. Anyway, he has never seen that man since. When I ignored why he did not check the listing when it became apparent the homicide man had overlooked it, he said if the man was involved, the tag was probably stolen, and if not, it would not have done any good anyway. Besides, you did not mess with anything that wasn't your business if it had to do with homicide when Captain Fritz was there. They were the elite, a clique, and if I had looked into it, I would have been sorry. Tilson advised further that his wife died 3.5 years ago, and he went through the house room by room, cleaning everything out that reminded him of her. When he came to the suspicious man information, he thinks he threw that out too. In answer to the questions of why he went to the local news media a few days previous to this interview with his complaint against the homicide oversight, he answered, because some publicity might bring some more out of the woodwork. The more policemen that retire, the more you're going to hear from. Until Harry McCormick, his longtime reporter friend, died, he had been able to verify that his information had gotten to homicide because Harry told him that he had seen it in a pile of other information in that office. More verification came from Margaret Hill in the Warren Commission report. She saw the man in dark clothes run up the grassy knoll and towards the railroad tracks. The railroad man named Burton saw the next sequence from there. They fixed him, made it look like an auto accident. No further comment. He was up in that tower and saw the man run across the tracks, and toward the embankment, I saw him run down. I think they're talking about not Burton. I think you got the guy's name wrong. Oh, it's right on the tip of my tongue. Lee Bowers. Lee Bowers, that's it. Bowers saw more than that. He saw a motor jockey check that dark car parked there before the shooting. He was a close friend who was a state. He has a close friend who was a state trooper, and he knows about it too. He suggested that we ask the reporter named Goals, as he knows the trooper's name. Goals on the Dallas Morning News wrote Tilson's story the other day. Tilson knew Jack Ruby. He had the Silver Spur on his beat. Before Ruby had a car, he would take him in the police car to the florist at Inwood and Lemon, where he bought so many flowers. He was a good guy like that, going to that florist so often to buy flowers for sick people. He often took him where he wanted to deliver them himself. He remembers taking him to an apartment in South Dallas and Oak Cliff. He said he helped Ruby because Ruby liked policemen. He went to his Vegas club on Oaklawn several times. He never went to the carousel as it was too hard to park. Tilson knew J.D. Tippett well. On the job, his locker was right next to his, and he had been in Tippett's house and Tippett had been in his. He was an alert officer. He couldn't understand how anyone would get the drop on him. He believes that Tippett knew Ruby as all the policemen who worked South Dallas did. He knew, though, that Tippett would never go into any other clubs. He was always too busy working on extra jobs, making money for his family. When Tilson found out where Tippett met Oswald, he figured that Oswald must be heading for Ruby's apartment. Tilson never heard of Lee Harvey Oswald before November 22nd, 1963. So there we have Tom Tilson of the DPD. And if only that I could do the voice for a sustained amount of time for the next fellow, Mr. Elmo Cunningham. Elmo Cunningham of the Dallas Police Department. Interview by Jack Moriarty, August 10th, 78. Related how he missed the activity at Dealey Plaza insomuch as Tippett's shooting came on the radio as they were leaving the Trade Mart, having secured that detail, and ordinarily would have reported to the plaza. Instead, they responded directly to 10th and Patton, found the body had been removed, and reiterated various facts just prior to, during, and immediately following Lee Harvey Oswald's arrest and transportation to homicide, recited nothing which could be construed as new or different. He said he did know Jack Ruby. As a rookie, he worked one evening as a dance hall manager at Ruby's Silver Spur on South Irvay. Later, as a member in the forgery section who handled CDW and assault cases. He had occasion to hold Ruby for court action at least twice. Once when brought in by uniformed men, RE, CDW, concealment of a deadly weapon, a pistol. He heard explanations and concurred holding Ruby for court the next morning. And once when hearing facts following Ruby's arrest for assaulting one of his musicians, resulting in his arrest again by uniformed men. Didn't recall any details of the case other than no serious injuries was involved. Advised him of the Walker tape and of my developing information to the effect that the two private investigators had later turned the tape over to him. He replied that it did sound familiar, but he could not recall the incident specifically. Love when amnesia comes and goes. Recalled being assigned to the case and interviewing General Walker several times, but never got the investigation off center. The sole achievement was having the submitted slug identified by the FBI lab as having been fired from Lee Harvey Oswald's rifle many months later. That's a lie. Also recalled running Scotty on the polygraph and clearing him. Now, this would be General Walker's Scottish houseboy. Never listened to the tape as my recounting highlights failed to jog his memory. Adds it is quite possible he would have accepted the tape and turned it into the property clerk without listening to it. I suggested the possible risk involved in that procedure, and while he agreed, said it still could have happened, indicated I should talk to property clerk with a view of finding a record logging into it. Probably no report was made other than log record property clerk kept. We talked for a couple hours, and the more we talked, the more he remembered, but nothing new to me developed. Finally, he said he did recall the most interesting assassination incident in which he had been involved had actually occurred about 3 years after the triple murder in Dallas. Uh, One day, an investigator came to town from the California Penal Institute. He said penal. He reported one of their inmates recently killed another, and the survivor was now relating how he had shot President Kennedy in Dallas using a rifle on the fire escape on the west side of 501 Elm Street. Had been staying at named a walk up downtown, a small hotel, and left town responding to his mother and stepfather's home in Gladewater, Texas, where he buried the rifle in the backyard. Also, he had killed a third person in another part of Texas. He described the location, and a subsequent search did reveal a body. Moreover, a canvass of the second-rate downtown hotel disclosed evidence in the form of a registry card that he had, in fact, been in a hotel of this description during President Kennedy's visit in November of 1963. The investigation was pursued by Cunningham and a partner, but details are not that clear. However, the case was ultimately dropped, and the investigator returned to California when it was found that news media coverage predated his story of the third person killed. Although they did find the body, a time frame not clear now, they failed to locate the rifle in the Gladewater backyard, and they used metal detectors, which only retrieved beer cans, and the line of fire from the particular fire escape would involve shooting around the schoolbook depository building, which is not necessarily true. No names given with the investigation, but sufficient facts to rule out or verify as soon as time permits. So there's an interesting story from Mr. Elmo Cunningham. Elmo Cunningham, old emo Elmo. Right. Now, this is a weird one. This is a weird one, folks, for sure. Next up, we have the HSCA testimony of one Mr. John Grasafi, spelled Z-R or Grizzaffi. And they're interviewing him, of course, for the HSCA. What is your present home address? Dunstan Lane, Dallas. Your occupation? I'm a shipping superintendent for Pilgrim Pride Industry. The committee has received information, Mr. Grasafi, that you may have knowledge of the possible possession of photographs or other evidence that relate to the Kennedy investigation of the Dallas Police Department, and that you may have received such information from various persons, including Mr. Studebaker, an ex-police officer. Would you tell us if that is true and what the nature of your contacts with Mr. Studebaker were? Grasafi says, yes, sir. Back in 64, I was in the liquor business. That's liquor, as in whiskey, hard spirits. The American Liquor Store on Knox Street, and at that time, I had a lot of friends with the police department in Houston. They would come by my liquor store. I used to sell liquor wholesale to the police officers, and they always stopped in to get their liquor or booze, whatever you want to call it, and we naturally became pretty good friends. I used to hunt and fish with some of them, and Studebaker came over one night and brought these pictures. First, he told me about them. Then he brought this stack of pictures out. I would say it was maybe 2 or 3 inches thick, and they were glossy pictures. They were about it seemed to me they were about half as big as this envelope, indicating. And the pictures that I remember more than anything was the one picture of Oswald on the slab after, he was pronounced dead. I remember that picture very vividly. And I also remember a picture that Bob showed me that there was a picture of 3 empty shells. Then he showed me another picture, and he pointed out another empty shell, and he said, here's a shell they don't know about. Now, this I do remember, and that is the God's truth if I ever told it. I just wish I could think of some other people that I showed these pictures to, or I could come up with more information for you. If I do, I will certainly be in contact with Mr. Maxwell or some of his associates. All right, when he shows you the stack of photographs, which, to the best of your memory, was 2 or 3 inches thick, did you look through the entire group of photos? Yes, sir. And you described the size as approximately half the size of the envelope in terms of inches. Would you estimate that was an 8 by 10 photo? Yes, sir. So we're talking about big 8 by 10 crime scene photos, folks. And you mentioned specifically 3 photos that you can remember. One of them was Oswald. I take it on an autopsy table. Is that correct? Right, Grasafi says. And then 2 photos which relate to shell casings, and that is empty shell casings. Spent rounds, yes, sir. And could you tell from the photo whether they were rifle or pistol shells? No, they were rifle shells. The photo in each case, what did it have in the background with the empty rifle shells in it? Well, shells, with maybe cardboard boxes laying on them, stuff like that. Just a warehouse, sort of like a warehouse. Like a warehouse. And the shells were laying on what? On the floor. On the floor? Yes, sir. And in one of the photos, there were 3 shells. And then he shows you another photo, Studebaker did, and said this is a 4th shell that they didn't know anything about. Grasafi says, right. He said there's an extra shell that they don't know about. All right. Why did he show you the photos? Well, honestly, we were going to try and sell them. Now, I did get in contact with a man that was going to buy the schoolbook depository. How I got in contact, I don't remember, but I did get in contact with him, long distance. I would say it was either in Tennessee or Florida, but I don't remember. But he turned it down because the deal with the schoolbook depository fell through. He didn't buy it, and he turned the deal down. I was asking $25,000 for the pictures. All right, you then were going to get some percentage or cut out of the 25 grand for your role in finding a buyer? Yes, sir, but I don't remember how much. All right. And the one buyer you mentioned did call long distance, was also interested in buying the schoolbook depository building? Yes, sir. In fact, it was pretty well known at the time that he was going to buy it. During the period that you were attempting to contact or negotiate with the individual, did you have the photos in your possession? Yes, sir. Locked up in my safe. And for about how long a period of time was that? Grasafi says, I would say for a week or 10 days. During the period you had the photos, do you recall whether you showed them to anyone else? I remember showing them to another man, Tom Johnson, who was at the time a political editor of the Dallas News. He had taken Alan Duckworth's place. Alan was political editor. He was a good friend of mine, and he died. And Tom Johnson had replaced him. And I showed them to him, to Johnson, or he remembers the picture of the slab, but he doesn't. I mean, of Oswald on the slab, but he doesn't remember the others. And at the time, he was drinking pretty heavily. Did you show them to anyone else? I know I did. I'm positive I did. If I could just rack my brains and remember, if I could just remember one person other than the guy I did show it to, then I would have the key. It would just break everything loose in my mind. So are you sure you showed it to someone else? You just can't recall at this point in time who that was? No, sir. But if I do, I will be in contact with Mr. Waxwell or Mr. Cliff. All right. Did you show them to your wife? Well, I wanted to show them to her, but when I told her about the pictures of Oswald on the slab, she didn't want to see them. Since you have brought to the attention of the investigators the fact that this particular event occurred, have you discussed it with your wife? Yes, sir. Does she remember that you did offer to show her the prints at the time? Oh, yes, she remembers. She remembers that, but also she didn't want to see them. I kept thinking, I said, well, honey, did I actually show you the pictures? And she said, no, I didn't want to see them after you told me about them. The picture of Oswald on the slab. In addition to the one buyer you mentioned, did you attempt to sell the photos for this 25 grand to anyone else? I know I did. But I can't remember to whom. You see, everything, if I'm at liberty to say, everything Stanley Skotnick, who used to live right here across the street from me on Dunstan Lane. His wife was a white Russian. Her name was Katya. Now she is married to a man named Ford, and I think they live in Maryland now. She divorced Scotty, and she was the interpreter for Marina Oswald during the assassination or after the assassination or something. She was her interpreter. She in turn sold her home to Marina Oswald. Marina and her husband Porter, Kenneth Porter, lived right across the street from us. And it was like a parade every Saturday and Sunday, people just driving down to see where they lived. And ironic as it may seem, I will be doggone if they didn't buy the lounge right near my liquor store. And they opened up a bar. Of course, she was not allowed to get the license in her name, so Kenneth had to get it in his name. And the first bottle of beer that they sold, I bought it. And Marina and Kenneth signed the bottle. It is a Falstaff, bottle of Falstaff. I've still got that. I've still got it. And I'll be glad to trust it with Maxwell if he would like to bring it up here and show it to you all. But did this have some connection with the photos? Well, no, it didn't. It was just sort of ironic the way this thing all happened. You don't remember, I take it, the name of the person who was interested in buying the schoolbook depository? No, sir, but somehow, some way, I feel like I'm going to come up with the answer. Did you save any of the telephone bills, your own telephone bills from that period that might have the telephone number on it? So I wish I had. How'd the transaction end? After you attempted to sell them, what happened? I never did take them out of my liquor store. The pictures stayed there. They stayed in my safe. The only time I took them out was after I was closed to show them. And I know I showed them to someone, but I can't remember who. But I will. But Bob, Studebaker, came back and got the pictures from me about a week or 10 days later. But he came at night after I had closed. What did he say to you at that point? In other words, did he tell you why he wanted the photos back? He said he was going to try and find a buyer for them. He has got to remember. The only shells, of course, that were recovered or known to exist from the Dallas Police Department's investigation was 3 shells, and that leaves the implication that possibly that if he did discover a 4th shell of a photograph of it, then he might also have had the shell. Did any conversation occur between you and him as to that fact? Did he ever tell you that he did have physically the 4th shell? No, sir. He never told me that he had the shell personally, but he has very definitely pointed a shell out in photographs by itself. What is your understanding on that subject based on the conversations you've had with him? Would you have inferred that he did have the shell personally? I would have thought so, because this would have been a big selling point. I mean, you had to have something to go with the photographs. I don't believe a person would, pay 25 grand for a bunch of photographs without the negatives or without the bullet or something. Was there ever any indication that he might have, in other words, in the conversations that you had with him, that he might have had something to provide in addition to the photographs to the buyer? In other words, once you located a buyer, was he going to do something else with the buyer, for the buyer? Well, he would have taken over then. Once I would have found a buyer and showed him, where I could have showed him the pictures, the photographs. Did he ever say anything to you, like, if you locate a buyer, I've got some more things to say to him or something else? No, but it was understood that once I found a buyer or someone that was interested, then he would take over from there. So then the fellows at the HSCA decided to talk to former Dallas police officer Robert Studebaker. Well, it was just whoever was on duty at the time was the one that made the photographs for whoever wanted them. And I don't know how many I printed or how many other people have printed or who bought negatives in at one time to make prints, who wanted how many prints, or I don't know. So if I understand your answer, is it essential that during the 2 weeks following the assassination, you periodically, along with other officers, did have the responsibility for the creation of blow-ups of any photographs that were needed? Studebaker says, yes, sir. Now, redirecting your attention to the question of the fourth shell, we have received specific information that you have represented to various persons that there was a fourth shell. And in fact, evidence of it was contained in the set of photographs which you had during these conversations. Let me ask you one more time. Do you recall making any such representations? Studebaker says, nope, I do not. This person has a very vivid imagination, and I'm sure that he saw another shell, but there was no other empty hall anywhere. There were 3 halls. The homicide officers found them. They preserved them, and they were there, and we photographed them, and that is all. Which person is it you say has a vivid imagination? Studebaker says, Mr. Grasafi. You think it was Mr. Grasafi that provided the information to us? Yes, sir, Studebaker says. And what is the basis of that belief? Well, he's the only one I know that can make up anything like that. I love how he just pulls this guy's name out of thin air. Thin air, folks. So you are assuming that the source of our information is Mr. Grasafi, and it is his vivid imagination which produced the story and not anything that you said. Studebaker says, yep, that's it. I would like to direct your attention to your Warren Commission testimony, which reads, in pertinent part, as follows. You were describing the photographs that you took on the 6th floor in the area of the window that the assassin is believed to have shot from, and you testified as follows. Now, I took 2 of the photographs, and Lieutenant Day took 2. We took double shots on each one. These are the ones I took myself, these pictures. There's the 2 pictures that I took. This one was right before anything was moved. There is a hall here, and a hall over here. And apparent indication that you are pointing to various places in the photograph. The counsel of the Warren Commission, Mr. Paul, then stated, now this picture you have just identified as the picture you took will mark it as Exhibit A in your deposition. And you said, yes, sir. So, interesting that we have allegations of members of the Dallas Police Department trying to sell photographs pertaining to the Kennedy assassination. Because apparently everybody and their brother that worked in the Dallas Police Department were getting copies and copies and copies of all these assassination related photographs. A la, what's his name? Oh, Roscoe White. Sorry, folks, had a brain fart there. Roscoe White. Now we have Studebaker and Lieutenant Day and a whole host of other folks. There was a book called First Day Evidence. Can't remember who it's by, but they had a lot of photographs from the assassination. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that somebody be trying to sell pictures, including Oswald on the slab. And I've seen a lot of these pictures, and some of them you can see Oswald's hog hanging out. So if you had a picture with Oswald butt ass naked, dead laying on a slab with a Y incision of an autopsy and his hogs flopping around, probably be worth some money. Now, this indication of a 4th hall is one that I've never heard before. If it'd be something if this 4th hall was been photographed in place and then picked up and put away later, when they only needed 3 halls, to explain the sequence of shots. It's pretty interesting stuff, but I just don't know. I mean, it kind of smells kind of fishy. Do I think Grasafi and his buddy Studebaker here were selling pictures? Yeah, hell yeah. Were they kind of making up stories to make them seem like they'd be worth a hell of a lot more money than what they actually were? Oh yeah, for sure. That's called, Grasafi was Studebaker's hype man. Hey, get as much Get as much of these pictures as you can, and I'll cut you 50-50, 60-40, 70-30, son. And we'll see where they lands. So, not surprising, folks. Not surprising in the least. But that is the Dallas Police Department. And I've seen a couple of comments coming in, some emails about the sequence of events that led to the shooting of Oswald by Ruby in the basement of the DPD, and how it could not have been just a mere coincidence. They had to be waiting until Ruby was in place. It's just all way too fishy. All of it way too fishy. The timing of everything. Fritz was controlling everything down to, how they were going to do it, what time they were going to do it, and all that jazz. And it cannot be a coincidence. It just can't. I just don't believe it. Never will. And of course, all the DPD fuckery going on at the Tippit Oswald, or the Tippit murder site with the second wallet and all this jazz, and the horse's assery going on at the Texas Theater. It's just one thing after another. It's just the DPD smells fishy, man. It smells fishy. The little teat teat, according to Earlene Roberts at the rooming house. She looks out the window and there's a DPD car. The whole thing of how in the hell they had officers showing up at the rooming house at 1:30. How is this even possible? Nobody even knew where Oswald was staying by then. But somebody at the DPD knew where to look. That's for damn sure. So, those complicit bastards, the Dallas Police Department, folks, in it, knee deep, I tell you. It's brutal. Brutal. But anyway, that's it